So the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition, for those that might not know, is a nonprofit with the mission of inclusively doubling tech talent in the Milwaukee region. And one of the things that we sponsor as part of our mission of connection and building connections and community is Milwaukee Tech Week. There's over 44 events that are occurring throughout this week. We are on day 4 and still a lot to go. Tomorrow there's a number of activities here being held that are focused on developing various technical skills, but also there's a session this afternoon, for example, around creating an inclusive educational atmosphere on campuses as well in the talent development area as well. So really excited. But this doesn't happen without partnerships, et cetera. So we're very happy to have Northwestern Mutual and Hush Blackwell as premier sponsors of the week. But also that all of the content is kind of by the community, for the community, et cetera. And that's why it's so important that we have the time of our experts here today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over and say thank you for being here. Let's see you guys.
I think we got a queue up here.
Yes, we do.
Wait for it to turn green.
Check. All right. Oh, it's flashing. And friends, it would not be Tech Week without some technical challenges, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
This is what we do.
Yes. Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are definitely excited to be here this morning. We're going to start off our fireside chat with just some introductions.
Yes.
I'm Johanna Duckworth, and this is my wonderful colleague, Allie, and we are excited to talk to you today. We're just going to have a conversation. And so Allie and I are both coaches, and we'll get a little bit more into our professional background and our credentials in a moment. But I love the idea of a fireside chat because it gives us the opportunity to not be so structured and to have a flowing conversation. And we hope that it'll be impactful around the subject of what's holding you back. So let's get started.
All right, let's. Okay, friends, I want to introduce you to Johanna. And to start with, I'm going to read her professional bio because let's dive in, right? Let's hear all the credentials first. So Johanna Duckworth is well trained to help women get unstuck and advance their careers. Possessing a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Information Systems and an Associate of Arts degree in Fashion Marketing and Retail Management gives her valuable insight into developing powerful brand images for her clients. Johanna is a certified coach, mastermind facilitator, and personal image branding consultant who specializes in helping women discover their God-given purpose in life and live it with confidence. Through strong interpersonal listening and rapport-building skills, Johanna shows women how to live a life styled from the inside out. With a background in fashion, tech, and consulting, Johanna Duckworth has made several pivots in her life. Through her business Lifestyled, a life coaching and personal image branding company, she uses the valuable insight and practical knowledge gained to help others looking to find a new path. Reinvigorating lives and revamping personal images comes second nature to this devoted wife of 20 years and dedicated mother of twins. To witness this incredible motivator and transform your life, learn more about her internationally respected speaking engagements and coaching services. Be prepared to leave inspired. And I want to share with you, I'll add my personal commentary to that, which is, you know how there are some people in life that you meet where you go, oh, this is a person I want more of in my life. Mm-hmm. And that is the exact experience I had from the first time I met Johanna. She's like the person I wish I knew when I was a teenager, because we would have stayed up all night talking and like never run out of things to say. And so be warned that we will do our best to keep this conversation a little more curated and a little more on task, but we always end up going, oh, that reminds me of this thing, and that reminds me of that other thing. And so I am so excited to be able to share the conversation here today with you.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. So now it's my turn. I have the pleasure of introducing Allie Bubb, who has a punk rock soul cleverly disguised in a middle-aged mom's body.
True story.
She combines enthusiasm and authenticity into her work as an executive career coach, speaker, teaching people to tell compelling career stories and step into their next level of leadership, because when people genuinely love what they do, our workplaces, homes, and worlds are transformed. After 20 years in corporate technology roles, she is passionate about fixing the leak, in the tech pipeline by equipping women and non-binary individuals to leverage their distinctive strengths in leadership, creating more equity at all levels. Allie is the founder of the Best Ever Mastermind, a transformational coaching program that enables people to make their biggest dreams a reality. She is also a best-selling author of Success Authentically and Change Authentically. Allie earned a Bachelor's of Science in Management of Technology Information Systems from Michigan Technological University, and an MBA from the University of Wisconsin. She is an entrepreneur, a coach, a keynote speaker, an author, as well as a thrift shopper, nature lover, cat cuddler, and a parent of 2 spirited children. Work Authentically is reinventing the world of work by teaching people to leverage their unique style, approach, and their way of being while helping companies do better by leveraging people-centric approaches through presentations, workshops, individuals, and coaching groups. So now I get to give my personal testimony. So we had to do that, like all of that stuff, right? That was a lot. But what I want to say about Allie is that our paths connected at a very pivotal time in my life. And I got to witness firsthand her genius as it relates to coaching and helping people transform. And so, as you heard, I have a background in technology, and that I walked away from that career because it didn't serve me well. I was the recipient of all the isms. And so if you can think of all the isms, and it was very young, I was very young at that time, in my early 20s, right out of school. And I was the youngest in a all-white department of mostly males. And some females as well, but needless to say, I didn't have any allies at the time. I didn't have anyone championing for me, helping me to navigate my professional career in technology. And so what I ended up doing is I left because it didn't work for me. And long story short, 20 years later, I am now coaching women in technology to help them find their voice and navigate their professional journey so that they don't have to experience what I went through. I didn't have a voice at that time. And so while I was I had a lot of pit stops in between. And as Allie mentioned in my bio, one of my career pivots led me to an upskilling in technology program. And that's where I met Allie. And she really helped me see who I was and how all of my experience is valuable, and how to bring that into where I am today. And that was probably about 3 years ago. It was before the pandemic hit, probably right before, if I'm not mistaken, the pandemic hit. And so it's been fantastic to work with her. And so we met when I was searching for my next thing to do. And to be able to share this space with her today warms my heart. Yes, so let's get started. Let's dive into our content for today.
All right, and so I want to invite everyone to share as you're comfortable. We're going to ask for show of hands. And so introverts, I see you, I am you. It's okay if you want to do like a little head jiggle, like a tiny hand raise, if you want to go full hand in the air, whatever works best for you. But we want to talk a little bit today about what's holding you back. And there are some big categories to things that can be holding you back. And so if this feels like part of your lived experience, feel free to say, yep, that's part of it. That's part of it. So the first one is fear. Fear can hold us back, and it can be a very general sort of fear, a sense of, ooh, I'm just not sure, I'm doubting myself. And so if anyone is in that space, feel free to share. Yeah. And it can also be a very specific sort of fear, you know, the fear of rejection, of being told no.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into many of these. The fear of failure, but also the fear of success.
Yes.
And so, you know, if those are things that you have seen, that you have experienced, definitely, like, we want to make sure that we talk about that. And in addition to some of those fears that we've named and the ones that we haven't, you know, there are other things too that can be holding you back. Procrastinators? Right, yes, I get this, right? There are things I can't wait to do. There are things that I would put off until forever if I could. And so thinking about how do we stop letting procrastination hold us back, there are also things around not being intentional with your personal brand, with developing that professional image, really thinking about, what in the world do I want others to think it's like to work with me? And can it change over time? How do I change it over time? And so anyone struggle with that piece? Oh, yeah, it's a huge one. It's one that people share with both of us regularly.
Absolutely.
What else can be holding you back? Well, not being your wonderful, amazing, authentic self. And sometimes we can do that at home, but not at work. Sometimes we can do that at work, but not at home. Sometimes we feel like there isn't really a place anywhere where we totally fit, we totally belong. We can just be us. And so that can hold us back as well. Another thing that I know can be a struggle, and this is one that we talk about regularly, is networking. You know, anyone want to throw up in their mouth at the thought of having to do that? I know that has been me, and even now I need strategies to make sure that I am moving forward with it, right? And so this is something that can hold you back. The other piece that you probably all heard is common career myths. Myths hold us back, the stories that we tell ourselves. You know, things like, my great work is going to speak for itself. Or, you know, I have to wait for fill in the blank before I can be promoted. And maybe that's something that someone's told you. Maybe that's something that you think is true. But there are lots of different myths that hold us back, that keep us playing small, that keep us from really moving forward with our careers.
I'd like to add one to
Ooh,
that
yeah,
as well.
of course.
So stories can also mean your story. So getting to the place
yes.
where you're comfortable about sharing your story. And so for a long time, I was just kind of like a little bit ashamed about my story, my journey, because it wasn't linear, right? It wasn't like, okay, I did this, and checked off all the boxes. Had a lot of twists and turns and dips and dives and hills and valleys. And so it took me a while to realize that's what makes me my authentic self. That's why you should hire me, right? That's why you should bring me onto your team. Why? Because of the depth of my experience. And so it took me a while to be comfortable with crafting my story in a way that was beneficial, you know, for not only for everyone else, but, you know, also for me. So the stories, the myths, and part of that myth being, you know what, because my career path has not been like everyone else's, I'm going to keep my mouth closed. I'm going to silence myself.
Yeah, I love that, Johanna. And here's the big secret that we'll let you in on. No one's career path goes the way that they planned. no one's is a direct line from the bottom rung to the top rung. Sometimes you're on the wrong ladder entirely and you got to move over.
Yes.
Sometimes it's down and then over and then up. It is never a linear path, and that is such an important thing to remember. The other piece that we already started touching on is what else is holding you back?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's the systems, it's the policies, it's the biases, it's all of the isms. And particularly in the world of tech, we are still working on breaking those down.
Yes.
We are still working on trying to create equity at all different levels. And so that can very much be a place where you get stuck, where you are feeling like you are being held back. And so we want to make sure that we touch on that today, because our fears keep us stuck, quite honestly.
Absolutely.
Like, we feel like we've got nowhere to go and no good options. Our myths, our stories, they slow us down. They keep us from making the progress that we want to make. And so we want to make sure today that we talk about these things so they're not the roadblocks that they can be for your career as you navigate a career in tech, because it can be wonderful. It can be amazing. We both know, we have seen awesome things. We work with people every day. And it can also be really challenging. And so how do we make our way through these roadblocks? And so I'm putting away the clicker so we can dive into the conversation. Let's throw a log on the fire for our fireside chat, and we can dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were thinking about having this conversation, we started to think about all the people that we've worked with, you know, over the years in our coaching, and me, I'm in, you know, both areas of the coaching and the branding part. And we're thinking about what's holding us back. And so when I was thinking about, you know, people that I've worked with, just starting on the branding side, because that's kind of where my career, independent of technology, started. And you know, my very first client, I can recall meeting with an attorney, and we were going through, you know, she wanted to upgrade her image. And so she hired me to help her, you know, go through that process. And I was kind of going through her closet as part of my, you know, process of moving her from where she was to where she wants to be. And we were going through some of the things in her closet. And as I was talking with her about that, I saw tears. Tears started to flow. And so I'm like, it's just a skirt. What are we crying about? You know, it's just a jacket. Where are the tears coming from? And so I learned in that process that what was holding her back was the thought that she had to stay stuck in a box with her image, and the fear of moving forward. And also like embracing that and thinking that she couldn't remain herself, and upgrade at the same time. And so that was a fear. Also, she had a fear of, her father wanted a boy and not a girl. And so that's how she showed up in her visual presentation. Very masculine. And she was you know, she identified as a woman. This was many years ago. But that's just how she showed up. And she didn't know why she was showing up that way. And so as we pull back the layers, that's what I started to discover. And all of those things was holding her back. And so even though she had achieved a certain level of success, you would think an attorney, right? She worked for a very large company in the city. She still had not reached her full potential because of what was holding her back, how she viewed herself, how she was showing up professionally. And so we had to go, you know, start to uncover some of those things so that she could confidently move over into the next level. And so you would say, well, what does clothes have to do with that? Well, it has everything to do. It plays a very big part in it and how you present yourself. And so that was one of my lasting memories of working with someone, and that was probably, you know, over 10 years ago, just really being able to visibly see someone who had attained a level of success, but something was still holding them back.
Yes, yes. Oh, I love that point. And it's such an interesting thing, you know, success on paper success as defined by your friends or your colleagues or your company, you can have all of those pieces and still feel like something is missing, something is wrong, something is just not quite what you were expecting. You know, there is almost this letdown sometimes when you reach that level of success, when you reach, maybe it's a job title, maybe it's a certain promotion or pay, and you go, oh, well, this isn't exactly what I thought it was. and now what? You know, and it's so many of those pieces that you were talking about. It's really going, okay, wait a second. I think there's more for me out there, more that I can contribute, more that I can do. Once we peel back those layers, once I really get in touch with that authentic self. I love
Absolutely. And so it really was a form of imposter syndrome, right? A limiting self-belief about, you know what, do I really deserve to be in this space, or allowing something that someone said to her, you know, like in this case, maybe her father's expectations or things of that nature, allowing that to linger in your mind and not being able to silence that, and that keeping you from moving forward to your next level.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that really brings up an interesting point too around what are the things that we need to let go of in order to move forward. You know, often we're all dragging around a ton of baggage, and which suitcases are we free to drop so that we can move forward? You know, whether that is an expectation that someone placed on us maybe a really long time ago, even as a kid, whether that's a certain this is how we do it here, sort of stern talk that you've gotten from somebody, where we go, okay, I know that maybe is how we used to do it, but that's not the way I want to do it. That's not the way I want to show up. That's not the way I want to approach this. And so thinking about letting go of those things that aren't serving is as important sometimes as, you know, often we focus on, well, what can I add? What can I add? What can I add? And removing is often one of the most important things for kind of moving into your next level of success.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so I'd like to ask you a question.
Ooh, yeah.
How has, personally, have you dealt with some imposter syndrome, and how has that impacted your career?
I love that question. And it's one many people battle. I for sure struggled with it for years. And there was a pivotal moment for me, actually, when I was working in tech, where I was in a meeting. I was brought in because of my expertise, and we were there to solve a problem, figure it out, get it done, move on. And a guy on the team grabbed the whiteboard pen. He was scribbling. You could hear the squeak of the marker as ideas were being jotted down. And I said my idea, and it was a good one, and wasn't captured, wasn't written down. Nothing happened. No squeak of the marker. It was like I didn't even say anything. And now, in the past, I would have wondered, well, maybe it was a bad idea. Maybe this isn't the thing that we need right now. Maybe all these other people know better than I. And that day, it also occurred to me that if I wanted the same result, I could keep doing the same thing. Or if I wanted a different result, I could try something different. And so in the middle of the meeting, I raised my hand. And I just sat there with my hand in the air until he called on me. And I said, quick question. Am I saying my ideas out loud, or are they only in my head?
Wow.
Did anyone else hear me? I know.
Well, let's pause. Awesome.
Oh, and there was like this moment of, I just did this in a meeting. But the woman to my right said, yeah, I heard you, and it was a good idea. The guy to my left said, let's talk about it more. And so it wasn't the way that I planned to show up in the meeting, wasn't necessarily it, but it was that moment where I went, wait a second, I can change this.
Yes.
I can control this. And when I do, it's going to result in different discussions, different outcomes. And it was really the first moment where I realized I need to step into my own leadership. It's not always going to happen the way I want to. It's not always going to be easy. But when I'm willing to do that and do it in a way that's still me, you know, with a little bit of humor and like I'm a little bit of fun, it was a wow moment for me. And from that moment on, I went, okay, that's the way I want to show up. And so I always encourage, when I'm working with people to think about, when you're in those situations, how can you bring more of your authentic self into it and still show up, still claim that space, still share your idea in a way that gets it heard. And
I think that's
important.
great. And so I so appreciate the fact that you seize the moment. You know, sometimes we go back and we think about, I should just, right. Like, I wish I would have did this. I wish I would have said that. I like to add another layer to that. And so that is, how do you do that as a person of color without being judged? Without being, you need to kind of tone it down a little bit. And so that's a very real reality. And so for us, speaking from a woman of color and having to be in these, difficult spaces and places and even, beyond tech as an entrepreneur, how to champion for myself, how to speak up to get deals and contracts and things like that. And so, there would definitely be times where I would think, okay, now something not so nice happened, but I have to think twice about how I respond. I have to think twice about how I respond, because even though I could be valid in my response, I want to make sure that, one, you heard me, and you know that I said what I said, right? I meant what I said.
Yes.
But at the same time, I want to do it in such a way that is not offensive, right? And so that is your personal brand. That is your personal brand. And that takes developing and cultivating, right? And so getting to the place where, and you know what? I'll just say this. It's unfortunate. But it's the reality of the situation. It's unfortunate that we have to think back, like even take another step back from being a woman in a place to being a person of color in a place, to think about, where am I, right? Who's in the room? And then how do I craft this message so they know that I mean business, but at the same time in a way that's not offensive. And so making sure, and so you want to get to a place where that is not holding you back, because guess what? Until the day I die, I'm going to be a black woman. Yes. I'm going to get the microphone. Hold on. Let's get the microphone. We want to make sure we can hear you.
I just want to say that on the other end, when we're walking into those rooms and we're the only person that looks different, we respond that way because of the responses that we got. And
Yes.
I think I would love for you to speak to that, because it's this defense that goes up right away. And why do we have to go into rooms and feel uncomfortable or feel like we have to have those things? It's because in our experience, we've had this. We've felt the unconscious bias of the person on the receiving end of the things we've had to say. So until people understand that full circle, and we start the conversation with, this is how I have to show up and this is what I have to do, also understand why we have to do that.
Yes.
So I would love to hear.
That's an excellent point. And I think that, because of the times that we live in, and so if you think about growing up as a child for a person of color, black and brown people of color, there's different conversations that our parents have with us, right? As we're navigating in the world, and there is a term that you may or may not be familiar with called code switching, right? And code switching is something that people of, many people of color, especially in my generation, we grew up doing. We just grew up doing it. You know what I mean? And so we don't even think about it. It's just like we know how to do it. And so I think that, your point is extremely important for the outside to be able to understand this is why we show up the way that we do sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes there needs to be some grace given, right? Because if you think about, there's another generation that's behind me that may not have learned that, right? But then when they come into other places of people that may be of an older generation, then they expect something different from them. And they're like, wait a minute, I'm coming in as my authentic self,
Right.
And why do I need to change because of you? You know, you need to be okay with who I am as a person. Yes.
Can you define code switching as you're using it here and maybe give an example that we can relate to?
Sure. So in my personal definition, there may be a different definition of it, but my personal definition would be that I having a conversation sometimes with my peers and with people maybe that I'm in a personal relationship. It's just different than when I enter a room of my colleagues. It's a different conversation. I know that there's different things, some things that I should say versus some things that I shouldn't say. And to be honest, sometimes I wish I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have that
Yeah.
built-in mechanism. But it's because I'm a woman in my 40s, and I grew up in a time where it was necessary for me to be. And my mom and dad, came from very humble beginnings. And my dad migrated here from the South in a time where he grew up in, desegregation and all of those things. And so that definitely has an impact on how you raise your children, right? Especially migrating from the South to the North. And so it was like, okay, well, when you go out in public, we raise you to be respectful. We raise you to talk a certain way. We raise you to act a certain way. And in my culture, it was a thing back then where you didn't embarrass your parents. You just didn't do it, right? It doesn't matter where you were, even if my parents weren't around. They instilled in us such a degree of, respect, integrity, all of those things that even if you're out and about, and not only that, if someone from our community saw us, they had permission to discipline us.
Yeah. Well, and can I add on to that?
Yeah.
Like a really simple example that I think many people don't even think about is, because for me, the code switching was always, okay, well, when I'm with this group, I have to act or talk about a certain thing in this way. There's a very narrow range of what is acceptable, particularly for women and for people of color, of basically like, okay, within these bounds. And like even the thing when I raised my hand, that was like right on the edge of, it could have gone a different way for me easily.
Yes.
But, I was on a team for a long time where they loved baseball. And friends, I have seen eternity, and it is a baseball game. Like, it is not for me. Like to feign interest in this conversation, and I would absolutely not be included in any of it if I did not go and check the baseball scores before these team meetings, because that was always going to be how it started. That was always going to be what we talked about before we got down to the real work. And so for a while, I was like, I don't even know what days of the week you play baseball. So every day I'm like, is it baseball day? And I would have to look this up. And so I shared this with a coworker, and he was a wonderful ally. And he started to redirect the conversation to say, hey, let's talk about something besides baseball today. Let's try something else. And it was that simple act that he did, and initiated by him. It was welcoming people going, yeah, let's talk about our weekends. Let's talk about anything but baseball. And it was such a welcome thing for me to experience, like, okay, thank you for understanding that
Right.
this small thing is a huge emotional lift. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kiva, and I'm a project manager with a group within the Wisconsin Center for Education Research. And I would define my role as like IT adjacent.
Okay.
So I'm not in tech. I want to be, though. And I'm pursuing a new opportunity I was sharing with Allie earlier with Quartz. And it's a great stepping stone because it's with Quartz, all of their work is predictive waterfall, they want to go to agile. That's what really attracted me to project management. So like from what I'm curious about, because my background is not in tech, I have a very winding road as yourself. I started off in chemistry, engineering, and then I did student services for a while. And then when I look at everything that I did, I started exploring project management. And I was like, oh, this would be really cool. I feel like agile is more palatable in the tech, IT development world. I mean, I'm trying to work with a non-agile team, but their project would benefit from it, and they're just like, cut it out. So I should have the opportunity in my next role, but it's still IT adjacent, and I think the enterprise is more so, it's not healthcare, it's not tech, it's just kind of more like operations and admin for this new group. So like, I would love to hear both of your perspectives about like, how do I like prepare for the role that I want? And be mindful of like these experiences, but like where's the balance? Because I don't want to expect to go in a room and like I'm just gonna assume that my experiences will be like the worst experiences, but I don't want to go in naive thinking that, I'm not gonna experience the same thing. And so, yeah, like kind of what you all are saying, like I'm just like, I don't want to deal with that. Like I just dealt with so much, but I would need some insight from you all about how to navigate and balance to be in that space like that.
So that's a great segue, I
Yeah, it
think,
is.
to some other things that we'd like to dive into. But I'm gonna defer
Sure,
to you
sure.
for the first
Um,
comment.
So I love that question, and it's one where you can leverage your project management background. Really thinking around, okay, well, we plan for the best, and we sometimes expect that it's not going to go to plan. We know that, so we've mapped it out. We know roughly what we think it's going to be. So you'll have, for this role, rough idea of what you think it is. You expect the best, and really assuming good intent in people goes a long way, when we're talking about those kinds of situations. And going, hey, I don't know if you know, but, and then you can talk through, share some of your experiences with people if it goes down a path where it's not. I always find that talking with people one-on-one is often the best approach if you find yourself in a difficult situation. If you're moving into tech and you're going, ooh, this is a really challenging thing to navigate, start with that person, because that's always the best way. And the other piece that I want to encourage you forward is so many amazing things about being in tech, about being there. Like, I have had roles that I have loved, teams that even now, if they were to call me, I would have to think really, really hard about it, because it's the sort of people that I would jump at the chance to work with again. I actually had one of those people call me this week, and I said, ooh, boy, like, I don't know. But it's one of those interesting things where you're going to find some amazing people. And figure out the ways to work around the thornier people, because that's just work in life in general, right? And so thinking about those things, I think is probably my first steps. Would you add anything on to that, Johanna?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say keep your eye on the prize.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think about, who you may encounter, because that could be something that's holding you back, It's a perfect example of what could potentially hold you back because you're thinking about what you could encounter. I would also say, cultivate your network. Employ a coach. That's what we do. Somebody to walk alongside you, because if you do encounter someone like that, you're going to need an outlet, right? And so somebody that you can talk to, that's trusted, that can help you. Tell me your name again. Kiva, that can say, okay, come on, Kiva, get it out, get it out, get it out. Let's talk about it. Let's listen to it, right? Exhale. We're going to help you create some goals or plan, help you to see the big picture. And then tomorrow, you're going to be right back at it again, Kiva, because we have to keep your eye on the big prize. If your goal is to get into the industry, and there's going to be some hurdles that you're going to have to jump over, like, let's just settle that, right? Like, let's just settle that. But I think that it is key for you to align yourself with people that can help you navigate it. because you have the experience. It sounds like you have the experience just without going into the detail. You just want to pivot, right? You just want to kind of turn the corner a little bit to be in front of a different audience. And so it's definitely doable. But knowing what your goal is and staying laser focused on it, the other stuff will fall off.
Yeah.
And it'll make you a better leader.
I love that.
Yeah.
Keep thinking about your big why. Like why in the world of all the things would you do project management? And like the short answer is why do any of us go to work? Well, it's for more money, more meaning, more impact, all of those things. And there's something else that drives us forward. And so be thinking about that why. Be thinking about what that is for you, because on the really long days, on the really hard days, you can go, okay, yes, but that's taking me towards the thing. It's so much easier to get through the hard stuff when you remember why am I doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to share your frustrations, because you will have them, you know, especially if you're moving into a technology related role where the majority overall, you know, statistically, is dominated by white males. And so there will definitely be instances where, you know, you could be even a double minority. And so getting used to that, like that's going to be a thing. That's a thing. So you just kind of have to be okay with that. Yeah. Great question, though.
Great.
Yeah.
And
Do you have a question?
ooh. Yes. Thank you for offering that.
Yes. Wonderful.
I was going to say that was kind of leading me down a path of wanting to ask you a question, Johanna, around. So we have maybe our big why. We know we're going to work. We want that money, that meaning, that impact. And we want more. Maybe we want to take it to the next level. We want bigger success in some way. How can we start to think about our personal brand and the way that we show up in the world? Because before I ever opened my mouth, all of you had an opinion of me today just by me showing up here. So thinking about that, you know, what can you suggest, or how do we align those things so that it's really something that takes you where you want to go?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think intentionality. I think that you should seek out where you want to go and be intentional about creating an authentic version of that for yourself, right? So that you can be in those spaces. And I think that getting comfortable with pushing yourself. So a lot of times, and I hear this conversation, unfortunately, I coach millennials. And so I'm not hating on the millennials. I can feel the millennial energy in the room, okay? And so, you know, no shade to millennials, but oftentimes, you know, and when I'm called in for branding, and this was happening way back when companies would call me in and say, hey, we have this young group of college grads coming out of school, right? They're awesome. They've got the skill set. They work very, you know, they know what they're doing. But the way they show up clashes like with our corporate culture, like, help us. You know, what do we do? And so then we have the millennials like, you know what? Take it or leave it. This is me. This is who I am. I want to be myself, right? And the organization was like, well, we want to leave it right now. We want to leave it. And so we need some help. And so I think there's this clash. Yeah. And so you add on to that the layer of the virtual world, right? Like we just came out of COVID and everybody's, you know, sweats friendly. Hoodie friendly, you know, we got the elastic going on in the waist.
The maker of elastic is my favorite person in
yes,
the world.
And I will say, you know, I got a little fluffier during COVID. I did.
Guilty.
But here's the thing. You know, I think that too often, especially in Midwestern states, we're really comfortable with being comfortable. Like, we just want to show up the way we want to show up, and we're comfortable with that, right? And okay, like that's okay. But when you're thinking about, okay, you know what? Now, when people come to me and they want to employ me to help them take them to the next level, they're usually ready. Like, I know I've been hovering in this space for a long time. I know now it's time for me to embrace. And so it starts with the mindset, right? Because as a professional, I can't take you further than you're willing to go mentally. And so it's, okay, am I ready to make this change? How bad do I want this goal? And can you achieve it? Can you achieve your goals without showing up a certain way? Absolutely, right? Of course. Will it take you longer? I don't know.
I think so.
I think there may be some research on that. I don't know. I haven't done my formal study, but I know that I am my biggest advocate. I am my own marketing, and so the way I get business is because of how I show up most of the time in the branding space. It's because of how I show up. People come to me, they see how I present myself, and that's not me tooting my own horn. That's me saying, I know who I am, I know what my goals are, I'm aligned with my goals, and so when I show up, I'm showing up as Johanna Duckworth, someone who works in image branding. Because how can I help you if I can't help myself? You would struggle with employing me, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know if she's qualified, right, for her to really help me in this area. And so I think that regardless of what your goal is, it needs to align. How you show up is just as important as the credentials that you have. And so I think being more intentional about that, even when it comes to your virtual meetings, even when it comes to how you show up, in that space. And so it's about being intentional.
I love that. Yeah. And I would add on to it, if anyone's like me and you want it to be easier for yourself, this is one of those ways, right? Like, we can do amazing, great work and all of those things. And if we're showing up in a way that doesn't align with that doesn't align with where we want to go, particularly if it's into a level of leadership, it's so much harder to get there. We have one more hurdle. We've created a roadblock for ourselves that can much more easily be removed when you go, yep. That's why the saying, dress for the job you want, not the job you have, is a common one. But stylish can be comfortable.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm stuck and right? Like, there are so many great options. And I think that's a really important piece too.
And it can be authentic, right? It doesn't have to be like how I show up or how you show up. It just has to be intentional.
Yeah.
I think you have to put the time in. When we first went to virtual spaces, you and I were having this conversation, and there were people showing up, and like, we can see you in your shorts and tank top. Like, if you're moving around and things like that. It took people a minute to discover, like, I actually have an image online, and how can I get that to the place of, like, I'm not in the t-shirt I slept in last night because the side of it is like
right. It's a low bar, but there's still a bar that you want to get to.
Yes. So all of those things, so like your virtual image versus your in-person image, and knowing that there's definitely a place where, and a time where, you should be thinking about, maybe I've been at this place for a long time. What would it look like for me as my authentic self to go to the next level?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is one of the harder pivots, is when people think they know you. When you've been at any company, any organization for a while, they think they know what they're getting, right? And it takes extra intention, extra work on your part to really go, okay, yes, that was 4 years ago me. That was 6 years ago me. And now I am more strategic. I am, more authentic. I am ready to, whatever are those things, those next goals for you. And that can be something that takes very intentional work, regularly in meetings, regularly in conversations, but also with how you present yourself. And that's a really important reminder for people.
Yeah, I agree. And so as we move to the close, myths. So this is something I know that you're really big on. Are there
Yes,
any
it
other
is.
myth busters that you would like to address?
Oh, I love that question. I'll talk about maybe just two, because I know we are getting close on time. But so when we say, oh, my work's going to speak for itself, I'm just going to show up, I'm going to do great work. Awesome, great. Everyone's going to love having you on the team. And I want you to know that Harvard Business Review did a study that shows men rate their performance 33% higher than equally performing women. So if you show up and do great work, just like your male peers, they're talking about it 33% more than you are. And so that means we can't just let our work speak for itself. We need to speak for ourselves. We need to advocate for ourselves. We also need allies that are willing to advocate for us, to say, oh, yeah, that thing Johanna did, knocked it out of the park, right? Like, we need those things just to be considered the same, equally performing. So that's one myth that I always make sure people are aware of, that people are thinking about, because it's a critical one. The other one that I think is a really important one to talk about, and this is one that clients bring to me, is, oh, I'm not ready yet. I need more experience. I have actually worked with clients who have turned down promotions because they thought they weren't ready, that they wanted another certification, maybe another class, another something. And that breaks my heart, because somebody believed in you enough to offer you the role. And so by saying no to that, you're not only saying that you're not ready, but that you don't trust and believe that they think you're ready. And so it's so much more work to work your way back from that. And so I want everyone to be thinking about, how can you say yes before you're ready? Particularly, and this comes again from some of the expectations placed on women, is really around, well, I have to do it perfectly. I have to do it so much better. I have to prove myself above and beyond. And when we work in that way, it leads to burnout. It doesn't leave any space for us to move to that next level, to take on that leadership role, because we're so busy trying to get it perfect. And so many women that I talk to find themselves stuck on a plateau where they aren't moving ahead, they aren't moving up, and they go, but I'm working so hard. I'm giving it my all. Yes, and how can we let go of some of those things so that you have room to take on that really cool, amazing strategic project, or to show up in a way that you were not up all night trying to prepare every single question that someone might ask you for the presentation and have an answer to it that you researched to the nth degree. What if you just got a good night's rest so you could show up and do a great job? Those are very different things. And so that myth can often hold people back. And so I'll pause there, because I know we are getting close here.
Yeah, and we're going to take some questions
Yes,
in the
we
next,
will.
In the next minute or so. I just wanted to add really quickly to that. So many times, women in particular, we are rehearsing like our past mistakes, our past failures, and why we don't qualify for something. And that's not often the case for our male counterparts, And so getting past that, you have got to forgive yourself. You have got to let it go, because that is definitely something that will hold you back. It will definitely hold you back. And not only that, a word that I really learned to embrace and really just learn the true meaning of it during the pandemic was grace. Grace.
Yes.
It's a simple word, but it's something that we don't give ourselves. So we'll extend grace to a friend, like, no, it's okay. You don't have to do that. It's okay. I got it. You'll take on more responsibility, but you won't grant yourself grace
Yes.
for mistakes, for, any kind of leeway. And so just, to be intentional about, as you're moving forward in your career, you need to give yourself grace and extend it to other people as well.
Yeah.
Because perfectionism is something that will hold you back, for sure.
Yes. That is such an important one. Remind yourself, I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
I love that. And so we talked about being on the plateau. And so now what's holding you back? Well, I hope a little bit less. We've started talking about all of the things. And we're going to quickly share how we can support you. And so, Johanna, I'll let you go ahead and introduce the programs that I know you have.
Sure.
And you can go ahead and scan this QR code.
Yes, so feel free to scan the QR code. I do coaching and consulting in the image branding space, as well as mindset coaching. And so some of that I touched on today. If you'd like to learn more about that, please reach out, connect with me. I would love to connect you with some of my groups. I have a mastermind group as well. And so we tackle some challenging things, but moving you from where you are to where you want to be. And so kind of my tagline is helping you live life styled from the inside out.
I love that.
Yes.
And so I want to also welcome you to consider joining me for Best Ever. And how can you not want the best ever, right? But it's really about understanding, hey, guess what? We know as soon as we make a plan, it's not going to go to plan. Life's going to happen, work's going to happen. It's probably all going to blow up. And so what do we do in the face of those challenges? How can we face them head on and go, in spite of the things that happened, because of the things that happened, I can confidently say that this year was the best ever year. I showed up as my best ever self in the face of all of that. So feel free to scan the code if you'd like to learn more about that as well. And we are going to open it up for just a couple of questions here.
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering if you both would mind sharing with us examples of women, executives or leaders or in their role who maybe were more like tech adjacent or IT adjacent. And like, what did they do? Like, have you ever worked with like a chief marketing officer, or have you ever worked with like chief of staff, and like, how did you support that person? I think for like myself, being first generation college student coming from urban neighborhoods, I've had to, like, a lot of things that I've learned about this world is like recently because I had to do a deep dive myself. But I'm guessing you both have so much experience because you do this work for a living. But if you can just give us some like examples of other professionals that you've helped to support that can kind of broaden some of our horizons if we don't know.
So I would just add before Allie jumps in, I don't currently work in a tech position, so I am tech adjacent, and as is Allie, we have had experience working in tech, but my advice would be for you to be intentional about networking. So connecting yourself with organizations such as the young lady, I don't know, I can't recall her name.
Yeah.
Yes, Milwaukee. She works for the organization that's sponsoring, that's putting this together. And so really being intentional about that, connecting yourself, and then seek out a mentor or an ally, someone that can help get you into a space. And I would also say my recommendation would be for you to stay connected to like job boards and postings and all of that, and newsletters, because a lot of times there's stuff that never makes it to like Indeed and all of that stuff, right? But it'll come through a newsletter that a tech organization, puts out. And so integrating yourself, immersing yourself into the ecosystem. And so there was, if you're familiar with Nadia Johnson, she runs the Milky Way Tech Hub, which is an ecosystem primarily for Black and brown people, people of color, promoting tech equity in spaces. And so learning about, what's out here, and then finding ways to align yourself with people that can help you do that.
Yeah. Yes.
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 Thank you for sharing.
Wisconsin Women in Technology.
Yes.
And they've got chapters actually across the state, including here in southeastern Wisconsin. The other thing that I will say is I spent 20 years in tech, and I always felt a little tech adjacent.
Right.
You know, like I was always straddling the world between what do the customers need and what can we deliver, and what are the technologies available, and how can we talk about them in a way that doesn't freak people out and helps them understand, like, how can they use them, and sort of bridging that world, the ability to go back and forth between those, having enough. One of my teams that I led, they always said that I oversimplified things. They're like, well, you know, it's a lot harder behind the scenes and coding. Yes, I know, but no one else needs to know that. What we need to talk about is what we're doing here, you know, why they need it, you know, getting them on board with using the system. And so being tech adjacent is one of the most amazing things, actually, because it sets you
really
up
is.
for being able to kind of weave in and weave out, and it gives you a breadth of experience versus a depth of experience. And I also work with plenty of people who are pure hardcore coder, like solid tech skills, going to be individual contributor roles, and they love it. And so if you start to discover you love it, by all means, like there's an amazing career in that space too. But just be thinking about it's okay to kind of wander between both and be adjacent to.
Yeah, it is.
Time for a few more? Yeah.
Yeah, let's take these two.
So I have a question. I was wondering, when you guys are working with your clients and you guys understand like what's holding them back, whether it be fear of failure or success or whatever those things look like, how do you get to the next step of moving forward beyond those fears? And once you understand the fear and you acknowledge whatever's holding you back, then what's the step after that?
It's a good question.
Yeah, it is.
So I would say, do you want to take this one or you want?
You can start. Yeah, absolutely.
I would say when I'm working with my clients, having them to identify what those things are, like you mentioned, but then, you know, taking a bite-sized approach to embracing them. Because the only way that you'll get past the fear is if you embrace
Exactly
it.
that.
And so sometimes that can be obviously intimidating for people, but there's an approach that you can take where, you know, you're taking small steps. You know, and so an example of that is if you want to, I'm just going to name something like create a new image for yourself. You want a new wardrobe, but you're scared of taking such a big leap. Start with lipstick, or start with glasses, or start with a necklace or a bracelet. You know what I mean? Like, if something about that is fearful to you or overwhelming, you take little steps until you get to the place where, you know what? I'm ready now to make a bigger leap. I'm ready to embrace more of what that looks like for me.
Agreed. Yeah, that was exactly the path I was going to take it down, which is, like, if you want to get over your fear of public speaking, well, don't book yourself in a national conference today, but let's start to figure out how can I talk more in maybe a group setting, a small group setting, and then like a bigger group setting, and then like, ooh, what if I presented department-wide for something on a topic that I'm really familiar with? And then, you know, how do you continue to grow that and like step that outside your organization? And so it's a series of steps.
It
Once
is.
you figure out that fear or the thing that's holding you back to move into, because as soon as you shine a light on it, that fear shrinks.
Yep.
It goes away.
Yep. And the power of coaching is accountability. And so the accountability is to yourself, not to the coach. But usually it is statistically proven that when people have accountability, they're more likely to accomplish their goal.
Yeah.
And so when you think about that, okay, I'm going to attempt to do something that is fearful. I might need somebody to kind of hold my hand, right? I might need somebody to help me walk through this space that will support me, that will, you know, kind of, you know, cheer me on, or whatever the case is, whatever it is that you feel like you need in a coaching relationship. And so finding someone that, you know, aligns with your goals that can help you do that.
For sure.
Yes. Next question.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you.
This is kind of an anecdotal asking you for your guidance. So I recently had a male colleague tell me I wasn't being friendly enough and I needed to smile more. And in the moment, I was like really caught off guard, so very apologetic. But reflecting back, I'm angry that that happened. So I'm wondering, where do I go from here?
I'm angry on your behalf as well.
Yeah.
So often it's those moments that catch us off guard where we're like, wait, like, did they really just say that? Well, and then you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, right? You got to smile, and I think the right first step would probably be to take that person aside and say, hey, I want you to know that when you told me that, here's how I felt, and that is impacted me. My ability to smile or not smile has nothing to do with the great work that I'm doing. And, do you smile more? Or, like, you can challenge to the extent that you feel comfortable, because that is definitely depends on the person sort of thing. But beyond that, also being ready for some of those, because that's a microaggression, and being ready for when those moments happen, because you don't know exactly when it's going to be. I got promoted once, and somebody was like, wow, how did you get that position? Thank you. By working hard, just the same way everyone else who got promoted did. And so you've got to be thinking about how can you address those. And so think about, for your authentic self, what would your normal response be? Or if you were talking to like a good friend, and have some answers ready, or some, sort of easy lines that can roll off. One, because that keeps you from saying something you don't regret later. And two, because then you go, okay, yep, I'm going to give them one of my standard lines.
So my approach, my response would be it's a little bit different, but it's from an image perspective.
Yeah.
And so I would ask them, which is a typical coaching question, tell me more. Like, what do you mean by that? Give me an example.
Yes. Shed a
Ask
light on
for
it.
more insight, shed a light on that. And then after they give you some more insight, I think that is enough information for you to now go back and do some self-reflection. Ask other people.
Yeah.
Like, hey, do you think that, I need to smile more? And it's not really about smiling more. What he is referring to has something to do with disposition as a whole. And I don't know anything, about that. But I would begin to ask some questions internally. And if there's someone that you work with, or just trusted people, begin to go down a path, because, this guy could be really a jerk. He could be, and say something really stupid like that. However, ask yourself, what is this? How can I use this for my benefit? Is there something about this situation? Like, it could have some truth to it, where people are reading something that I don't mean to project, right? And so now that's an opportunity for you. We didn't like the delivery, right? So that was off. We don't like the delivery. And sometimes a good message can come in a bad package.
Yeah.
And so I would say, taking a mixture of what she's saying and what I'm saying, and putting it together to say, okay, what's going to work?
Yep.
And is there something, like, have I heard this before? Maybe he's not the only person. I don't know. Maybe there's other people that have said this, or a version of this to you. And so starting to, we will really need more context to kind of start to peel back the layers. But I think starting to go down a trail to say, okay, is this something that could potentially in the future be holding me back?
Yeah.
And that's really the point of the conversation. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, I do, and I'm sure I can speak with Allie as well. We do discovery calls, and so discovery call is just, it's kind of like, let's go on a date first.
Yeah.
let's see if this is going to be a good relationship, right?
Yep,
And so
for
we
sure.
ask you some questions about what your goals are, what you want to achieve. You know, that's what I do in my discovery session, and just kind of determine if we would be a good fit for one another.
Yep, it's exactly the same process of talking about, okay, so what's important to you? Where do you feel stuck? And, you know, do we feel aligned as we would work well together or not? Because, you know, sometimes you can tell from talking with people, and it's not always a great fit. But yeah,
Yeah, and I also refer. So
for
if
sure. Me
if
too.
I'm not the right fit, you know, I have people in my network that I
That's right,
refer to
exactly.
and beyond. You know, sometimes I have met with people during a discovery call and they need more than what I'm able to provide them with. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's therapy. Sometimes that's, you know, beyond the scope of what I
Sure.
can do. And I'm more than happy to point people in the right direction because at the end of the day, it's about you getting what you need.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, we just have to do the preliminary to decide what that is. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I focus on group and individual coaching. And so you have a couple of different ways that you can work with me. And so obviously individual is one-on-one, focused on very specific goals, outcomes, things you want to achieve. Group is a little bit broader, but covers a bigger topic. And so, so both are available. And I think
Same.
the same is true for you.
Yep. Individual, one-on-one. Oh, we have to go. We have to cut off. Okay.
Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. We really appreciate it. I want to remind everyone, as you go through this process of what's holding you back, be kind to yourself. Be
Yeah.
kind to others. It's not an easy thing to do. So thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes. Thank you. We're open.